Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Power Man Podcast. My name's Rory Paquette. I am, as always, your very grateful host. And today is no different. Folks, we're blowing up, and it's all because of you. Thank you so very much for doing everything you're doing. If you're not out there liking and sharing and subscribing and doing everything, sending us the DMs, sending us your opinions, which, wow, we've had a lot of lately. I really appreciate that too. But if you're not out there doing all that, then I can't sit over here and do all this. And so I am eternally grateful to all of you folks out there in our audience. I hope that one of the reasons that you're doing this is because we keep bringing you these powerful guests, powerful men who have powerful messages. Today is no different. Can't wait to be able to talk to this guy. I think that you're going to feel like he fits right in with the Power Man podcast, probably. So before we get to that, if you're a friend of the program, and I know you are, you know what we got to do first. Got to pay a couple of bills, right? That's just how life goes. So let me pause for a moment, take a sip of my preferred beverage. Yeah, one more of those. Oh, that's good stuff, man. Just made that fresh too. And if you're a friend of the program, and I know you are, then you know what we're drinking, and it's Freedom Hill Coffee at Freedom Hill Coffee on Instagram. Go check them out. You guys are going to love it. Deep, dark, rich, bold, and beautiful, just like my wife. You guys are going to absolutely love their coffee. They brew a mean bean. They do a great job. They do all the right things for all the right reasons, and they support veterans. And you know how important that is here at the Power Man, so we support them. Folks, go check them out online at Instagram at Freedom Hill Coffee. Go get some Freedom Hill Coffee, guys. It's fantastic. You're going to love it. Tell them Power Man sent you. All right. Now, since we've done that, let's get to it. We got a great guest with us today. This guy has so much going on. He's even got a podcast coming out sometime in the future, which we'll talk about later. I just found that out a few minutes ago. But this guy is a men's coach, a somatic facilitator, and co-founder of something called MELD, which we're going to tell you guys all about, MELD. Please welcome to the show, Duncan Rich. Duncan, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing very well. Thanks so much for having me, Rory. It's good to be with you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure having you here, man. Before we get rocking and rolling, because I really want to hear your story and all about you, but I have two questions for you right off the bat. The first one is MELD, MELD. Is that an acronym of some kind? Just real quick.
It is MELD. Yeah, it stands for the Men's Emotional Leadership Development.
Men's
And
emotional leadership. Okay.
yeah, it's something that is coined by my business partner who had a training called the Men's Emotional Leadership Training, which was MELD. And so when we started MELD a few years ago, we decided to switch it up a little bit and roll with that as really our core ethos there.
Nice, nice. Okay. And then somatic facilitator.
Mm.
Now I had to look this up. So go ahead and tell everybody what is a somatic facilitator, just so we know, and then we'll launch into the rest of it.
All right. So soma is Greek for the body. Somatic just means of the body. So a somatic, I'm trained somatically, so I help men get out of their heads and into their bodies and start living from the bottom up. A lot of our work is based in, neuroscience, biology, um, polyvagal theory, attachment theory, lots of different sort of lineages coming together. According to polyvagal theory, created by Dr. Stephen Porges, 80% of the information in your system originates in your body and is relayed up to your mind for discernment, decision making, and and then you sort of have a cognitive experience. But so first you have a physical experience, then you have an emotional experience, which is a chemical physical experience in and of itself. And then you have a cognitive intellectual experience. But we live in a top-down world where almost everything is dictated from the mind. What should I do? How should I deal with this? Um, and those are good questions to ask, but when everything comes from the mind, there's already been a few actions taken. There's already a few steps that have occurred. And so we help men sort of slow down, get down into the root and, sort of short circuit some of the patterning and the habits that we have and the stories, and we just get into the felt senses. And it's just kind of another doorway. It's a set of tools that we can use for dealing with stress, dealing with trauma, dealing with life. Um, and it's been it's an incredibly fruitful and successful practice that we've been doing for quite a few years here now.
Nice. Nice. That's a great prelude to let everybody know kind of this is what we're going to be talking about today. So
Well,
I appreciate that
that's
answer
where
because
we're
it
going.
just encompassed so much. So let me kind of throw it to you then. I appreciate those answers so that everybody knows what page we're on. Um, let the audience know. Who is Duncan Rich? What are you about? Where'd you come from? Why are you here? That kind of thing. What got you into
Sure.
all this back in the day?
Yeah. So I well, I live in the Hudson Valley, in the Catskills, in the mountains, right outside a small town called Woodstock, New York, which you may have heard of. And I live with my wife, our 6-year-old son. Um, we get to spend a lot of time outside, a lot of time in nature, which has come to be just such an incredibly valuable part of my life. I grew up in Boston, in a suburb right outside Boston, called Brookline, Massachusetts. And I've lived sort of all over Boston, Allston, Jamaica Plain, and I lived in a vegetable oil powered school bus for a number of years, playing music, traveling around, just kind of exploring. I lived in Hong Kong for a while with my wife. I lived in New York City. And so I had always sort of had a lot of stimuli, I guess, going on. And when I moved up here to the mountains about 10 years ago, in the quiet and in the solitude that I sort of newly discovered for myself, I started encountering these layers of myself that I hadn't really experienced in the past. And it was not comfortable at all. Facing things that I had sort of said, okay, well, that happened. Um, things from my childhood, things from my young adult life. And I started, I wanted to lean into them and I wanted to make peace with these things and understand them and, forgive myself and learn and integrate these parts of myself and not feel like I was sort of adjacent or parallel to who I wanted to be, where I wanted to be. And I wanted to just I wanted to bring these parts together. And I started looking around for resources and um, I couldn't find a lot of stuff for men, not a lot of stuff that really resonated. Um, you know, my wife, my partner, her friends, they have a lot of community, a lot of, they have their circles and they have a lot of support for each other. And it didn't feel appropriate for me to sort of take up to become a part of those, but I wanted something like that. And so I was introduced to the work of Owen Marcus, who is now my business partner here at MELD, also a mentor of mine. Um, and his approach is steeped in, at the time, 20, 25 years of working with the body, or, 20 to 30 years of working with the body as a rolfer, um, with various sort of, at the time, fringe somatic trainings. It's becoming a lot more mainstream now. Um, and so his practice really resonated with me. I started working with him at the last company that we were at, which was called Everyman. And we did we used his methodology to create men's groups and retreats and courses and stuff like that, and ways for men to connect beyond sort of sports and the job and kind of more surface level stuff, but to get deeper and to have a more vulnerable experience that leads to a deeper relationship and greater trust. And we left that company in December of 23, so about almost a year and a half ago, and we started MELD to continue doing this work. I've been training under him for about the entire time. I'm as you mentioned, I'm a coach. I work one-on-one with men. We also have developed courses where we teach a group of men all at once, and we put them in a men's group, and so they get to practice this methodology with our structure for a group meeting, with our agreements that everyone agrees to, that really keeps the group together intact. We do retreats, trainings. We also train therapists and coaches in sort of weaving our methodology into their practice as well. So I came to this work just out of a need, and I still consider myself a student of this practice, which we can talk more about. It's really a very simple. Um, it's a very it's a very simple practice, and it also can be sort of the key to every door, which has just been a real game changer for me in particular, and with many of the men that we work with, nearly all of the men that we work with, if they're willing to sort of leave their preconceived notions and lean into something new, which, by the way, is something old. You know, this is the way that humans used to interact, and we used to be. We used to use our felt senses in survival and community and, you know, protecting the tribe and all of these things that have sort of been eroded over recent history. Um, and with that, our ability to connect within ourselves and to use our felt senses as an advantage, like our sight or our hearing or our smell or taste, you know, we also have this felt sense that has kind of been dulled and eroded, certainly in the modern day by trauma and stress and family and culture and life. Um, and so the work that we do is really a reawakening, which is a little esoteric, but it's really a remembering of these skills and these tools that we're all born with. We're born knowing how to express what we need. We're born knowing how to process things that are happening to us. And over time, those skills, you know, because it's inconvenient or because it sort of doesn't fit with where we are, they you know, they get eroded, they get dulled, and so they just need a little polish and a little sharpening, and we're able to bring these parts of ourselves that we've kind of written off as just gone. We're able to bring them back online and help men start living as more of who they really are.
Wow. I mean, that you unpacked a lot. So I'm making notes over here.
Yeah, sorry.
No,
Yeah,
I love it.
yeah.
I thank you for telling everybody all that. Let's go back a little and we'll kind of, cover a couple of little things, okay? And then we'll keep moving forward.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure everybody asked you about the school bus thing. I mean, was that like some long-term environmental deal or I mean, vegetable oil powered school bus? It's kind of unique.
Yeah, well, I blew up our van on the way down to rehearsal for this tour that we were going on. I was in a band for a long time, I was in a few bands, and I we needed a solution. We bought a 66 passenger school bus from the state of Connecticut. They have to retire them after 10 years of service. So a 66 passenger school bus is about 30 feet long, 25 to 30 feet long, you know, 30 rows of seats. No, sorry, 15 rows of seats. So we gutted it. We built a stronghold in the back for our gear, bunk beds, couch, little kitchen, table, seating area, hangout, and we put an auxiliary fuel tank in, auxiliary fuel system. We spliced, my bass player was like an industrial design guy, so he kind of ran the project here, but we did this ourselves and um, ran the coolant lines that went to the back heater through this auxiliary fuel tank, which we filled with vegetable oil. Any diesel engine is also able to run on vegetable oil, peanut oil. Um, they're remarkably similar fuels once the oil is sort of viscous thin enough,
Yeah.
so it's got to be heated up. Um, and that way, we could drive 1,500, 2,000 miles without having to fill up a tank of gas, which as a group of young uh, degenerates in the early 2000s was a real plus for us. And yeah, we lived out of that thing for a few years. It was quite the adventure. Just all over the United States, I've crisscrossed this country. I don't know how many times in the few years that I was on the bus. We were out there pretty consistently.
Wow. So is that just, you acting out and rebelling against, your parents or something that leads you to just go travel the country and live in a school bus? Or,
Sure.
what leads to that kind of
Yeah, partly.
behavior,
So
lifestyle?
I started playing the drums when I was 10. Yeah, when I was like 10 or 11. Our upstairs neighbor, we had a friend who lived with us at my parents' house, and he was older. I was 10 years old. He said, "I'm driving to California. I can't take my drum set with me. Can I sell it to you for 25 bucks?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll do that. Heck yeah." I was getting into music, and so I started playing the drums, and it was a way for me to not just express myself, but to focus my energy and attention and to be really physical and to exert a lot of energy and to get something right and to find like a flow state that and in my childhood I had into my adulthood is something I'm still sort of unpacking. I had a tendency to dissociate, a tendency to kind of shut down, which I think is very common, especially among boys and men. A tendency to um, just, there's nothing I can really do in this situation. I can't fight for the thing that I really want. I can't run away because I'm just a kid. So I'm kind of just going to like retreat into myself and just shut down the things that I want and um, you know, dull the desire. And so that impacted my life, and it impacts a lot of men's lives really dramatically. And when I started playing the drums, I was able to, string these thoughts together for hours at a time in ways that I got to, um, I was able to just get really good at something, try something over and over again, get really frustrated, get angry, express myself, and then also do this thing that I felt was really, really cool. So this was a practice of mine. I would play 2 or 3 hours every single day after school. Um, you know, my parents sort of made me come right home after school most days unless I was playing sports. And then I would come home and practice, and I started just meeting other people. My best friend who lived right behind me started playing guitar right around the same age, and we immediately just formed a band, and we would just play together, and other friends started joining, and it was just something that I did all throughout elementary school and then through high school. And then after high school, I started meeting these people who are older, and they were like, "Whoa, this is like there's music happening here. Like, let's do something with this." And I joined some bands with some older guys, and um, who at the time, they were 3 or 4 years older, which felt like quite a bit when you're 17, 18. Um, these really cool guys, and I ended up playing music with those guys for on and off for 20 something years. Um, and so part of it was a rebellion thing. Um, Part of it was just that coming of age, sort of rejecting what and having to sort of make your own path, and doing that with sort of an eye on sort of environmentalism also and sustainability. that was always sort of important to me, that always felt like this is seems really important that we take care of this place that we um, inhabit, that we get the privilege to run around on. Um, and that's sort of underpins a lot of this men's work that I do as well. It is a variation on um, the sustainability issue, regenerative sustainability. These kinds of concepts um, I also founded a number of years ago an experimental sustainability conference where I brought together sort of, solar panels and electric vehicles and geothermal and passive home builders. And we had talks about like where the money flows and how this works. And then something in doing that, I noticed like the people that are able to engage with environmental sustainability are people that have the safety to do so. They're generally a little bit wealthier. They, have the time and the space and the safety to think outside of themselves and to, you know, to care about the planet or nature, or, they're not worried about, what am I going to do? Like, how am I going to get my next meal? Like, they're not, cripplingly depressed. They're not like, what am I going to do with my kids? Childcare, they have things sort of sorted out. And that got me to thinking like sustainability can't just be for like rich people. It's got to be for everyone if this is going to work. Um, and so how can I help remove some of the barriers that people have to feeling this connection with the planet, with these other things around them, with something bigger? Maybe it's, a spirit or God or the earth or all of these things. And, there's a lot of ways to approach that. We had like tenants' rights organizations and, um, creative education organizations come to the second one of these sustainability conferences that I did, which was called One Fair, ONER New Energy Fair, which was really fun. And then the pandemic hit and it all went away. Um, but at one of those conferences, I brought every man in to do some of this somatic men's work. And then I became, I was in a men's group at the time practicing this methodology that my partner Owen had sort of introduced. um, and every man asked me to become their retreat event producer. My background was sort of event production at that point.
Okay.
And um, and from there, I just got more and more involved in the organization. So that's sort of a crude telling of how the music, sustainability, event production, men's work evolution transpired.
I appreciate that. It does kind of like bring it all sort of full circle to where you are now, which
Yeah.
is great. That's kind of where we're heading. So I appreciate that. So the program itself, because there are a lot of different men's movements out there.
Mhm.
Okay, and they range from you have to put on a loincloth and go hunt and fish to you're wearing like trying expensive whiskeys and colognes. You know what I mean on the other end. And either way, if it's a brotherhood of men, I'm in favor of it. I don't care what it centers around. Because from where I sit, at my age and with my experience, men need a brotherhood. Period. Go find it wherever you can. If you're offering one, I don't care what it is, as long as you're offering one, that's great. So, but yours seems kind of unique. It's got a different edge to it. So, I mean, you've got the environmentalist, swing to it and the sustainability part. Um, I guess if you could describe your version of your men's movement for the folks who are listening.
Absolutely. And I'll say that like the environmental sustainability, that's really just my journey that's like how I got
Okay.
here.
All right.
And it's how some other people sort of arrive at this, but it's not a it's not a central component of the work that we do, although when a man feels more connected, that includes to the world around him. So
Sure.
it's kind of more of a perk.
Okay.
Um, and I think, whiskey and cigars, uh, cold plunges at dawn, whatever it is, like
Right.
find a group of men and connect with them. Absolutely. I think there's no, I'm not going to say there's no wrong way to do it, but I'm going to say you know, most you're going to get something out of it. This brotherhood is it's incredibly important. Men as we get older and older and older, we have fewer and fewer close friends, real friends that we
For
can
sure.
call at 2 in the morning when something is, really going awry. So what any way that you can find some brotherhood or some men to connect with, I say go do it. The approach that we take is around training and reawakening these frozen parts of ourselves. So the paradigm, gonna zoom out now, the paradigm for masculinity
Hmm.
today, or and I don't even really like to talk a lot about masculinity because I think there's as many definitions of masculinity kind of as there are men. So,
Sure.
but the overarching paradigm for men is outdated. It's it's not really getting us where we want to go, and it doesn't really allow us to be all of who we need to be. So this belief that vulnerability is somehow weakness, this belief that, well, I have to, I'm the provider, I have to do everything myself, and I can't really lean on anyone for support or show that I am uh, hurting in any kind of way. I need to be strong. I need to be the roof over everyone's head. I need to, and there's nothing wrong with being a provider. In fact, I think that's very close to like an archetypical masculine, um, tendency. And I think expanding the definition of what we are providing is like it's needed now more than ever. So there's a really great book by Richard Reeves, who is the head or the founder of the American Institute for Boys and Men. And they're like trying to influence policy to include boys and men more so than we currently are. There's not a lot of sympathy for the struggles of men in the world. Um, we're, in some circles, we are believed to be, the root of all evil. And the approach that we take at MELD is that it's not the man that is the problem, it's the model. The model that we've been given is very limited. You know, there's one or two emotions we're sort of allowed to express. We don't really have great relationships with those emotions, anger being one of them. Um, but we also feel fear and we feel grief and sadness and shame and joy and gratitude and a whole multitude of complexity that it's not generally accepted in the sort of mainstream narrative of what it means to be a man. Now, that's starting to change and that's great. But men, in my view, are in need of an evolution. We need to keep pace with the evolution around us. And I mentioned Richard Reeves, and he's got a book called Of Boys and Men. It lays plain with data and research all of the ways in which boys and men are struggling and how the struggle is getting worse. You know, fewer and fewer men graduating, um, master's programs and higher, master's secondary
Sure.
degrees. Um, Fewer and fewer men graduating college. Uh, men doing, boys and men doing worse and worse in school. Higher rates, the suicide rate for men is pulling away. Like it's off on its own.
Yeah.
It's pulling away from women, and and it's getting worse. And so things for men are sort of heading down, you know, in a macro sense, the data shows that men are doing, worse and worse. And it's not every single man, but this is overall what the data shows. And um, and that leads to a sort of cultural belief that, like, okay, well, uh, I I I'm not going to be able to buy a house. I'm not going to be able to get the job that I need, especially with the younger generation now. I'm not going to be able to provide in the same way that my father was or that his father was. Those opportunities just aren't available. They're not there for me. Um, so like, why am I going to bother? Why it's hard to expend the additional effort when you feel like that the prize isn't there at the end. So it leads to this malaise. It leads to sort of, more divorce. It leads to less marriage, and it leads to men just sort of feeling a bit lost. Um, so when so that's what the current model has sort of gotten us, and that's feels to me to sort of be where we are right now.
Okay.
Um, and so how do we live into a new model when our tendency is to just repeat sort of what we've been doing? With all the intention of doing something new, when push comes to shove and my kid won't go to sleep and I'm late for a call and, the old, my dad comes out of me, and I do these things that, that I don't want to be doing. And I'm sort of repeating the patterns of what I was given. And so how do we create a new model for something that we've never been trained how to do? Is you do tr We find training. We seek out training. We seek out men. We seek out these men's groups that we have. They're like a dojo to practice and um, to be expressive and to say the wrong thing and to fuck up or to mess up, excuse me, and to
Okay.
um, okay, and to um, you know, and to let it out and to let it out in a physical kind of way where it's one thing to intellectually understand a problem that you have, and it's another thing to feel it. It's another thing to feel the root of it, where it comes from, get honest about it, lean into that discomfort of, what this could mean and what this means about me and, all of these stories. Just lean into that discomfort. You realize that you are safe, that you're not going to die, and then you're able to feel into something new, and then you're able to sort of recreate or build a new foundation, which leads to then sort of a sustainable behavior pattern change.
So I hear you talking about where men are, okay, the current paradigm. I get it.
Yeah,
And you're talking about the change that seems to be needed. How does MELD and you and your partner facilitate that change through MELD?
yeah. So in our programs, we help men to slow down, to get below the surface, and to feel into the things that have been building sometimes for years or decades, and sometimes for your entire life, below the surface. Parts of ourselves that we've shut down because of out of survival, out of a necessity. So like when you have a conflict with your parent and you're young, you can't fight back.
Right.
You can't run away. You need this person for survival. So you turn to sort of the third option, which is you freeze. So there's fight, flight, freeze. This is these are this is what your nervous system uh, does for you, essentially. It's not this isn't like an optional response. And we share this, by the way, with most of the animal kingdom and even sort of like pre-reptilian um, amoebas and, you know, life forms where when there is danger, we assess if we can take it. And if we can't, then we start figuring out how to get out of there. And if we can't get out of there, then we kind of like, then we sort of shut down and prepare for death or prepare for impact or prepare um, to lose something, to lose. And if we get into the habit of doing that, or we get stuck in these places, then we end up sort of building our patterns in our lives around being frozen in certain circumstances or in many circumstances. And um, and so that's when, you know, you get into an argument maybe with your wife, and all of a sudden you just are like, ah, I don't want to be here, and you just kind of shut down. Or you know, or something happens, or someone is sort of overstepping, and instead of being like, hey, no, like we're not doing that, you say, oh, okay, you know, well, I'll sort of make it up on my own time, and you know, I don't want to inconvenience them, and you know, I'm gonna just be the nice guy and take the high road here. And so all of these things um, come when we're sort of out of alignment with um, what we're really feeling, because a lot of us don't have that relationship with what we are really feeling, with what's going on below the surface. So our work, we slow down and we feel the thing that we've been avoiding feeling because it wasn't safe to do so when we started forming these patterns. But now, as an adult, you can do it. You'll be safe, you'll be supported. We create a container. Um, and actually, when you go into this kind of vulnerability, for lack of a better word, it shows everyone around you that they can trust you. It shows everyone around you that this is safe, and that, you know, depending on the circumstances, our groups are safe. There's another kind of vulnerability where you're setting boundaries, where you're asserting boundaries. That's what anger is for. Anger is for when you've been violated and you need to reassert a boundary. And, you know, and that can feel dangerous, and it's supposed to. And so that's another thing that men sort of shut down quite a bit, is like, well, I don't want to be scary. I don't want, you know, everyone around me. And so everyone around me to, you know, be afraid, or, um, you know, I don't want to be that guy. So then we don't have a relationship, a healthy relationship with our anger. And so with our work, we slow down, we touch into the thing that we have been avoiding, or the things that we've been avoiding, and we slowly feel into what that experience was like, what was missing from that experience, what you didn't get to say, what you needed at the time and didn't get. And we give it to ourselves now that we're adults, and we put ourselves back together with that healed, um, you know, the healed versions of those parts. So trauma is trauma can come from an experience that sort of didn't get to complete itself, sort of like when we're a kid. Like, I want that. My dad says no. Um, that makes me really angry. I don't get to get angry. So that anger doesn't go away. It stays in there, and then it becomes this fire that's only really burning you. But you can't let it out at your dad, because that's bad news. And you know, and that's worse. And then you get punished, and then it makes matters worse. So you learn to sort of police yourself, and you learn to shut yourself down and to pack it away. And now as adults, we can reawaken those parts. We can say the things that we never got to say. That can be a little convoluted and hard to get to, and that's where our support comes in. Um, and these guys, they leave our programs, they go back home as like different people. And then we hear from the wives and partners and families and, you know, business associates being like, who is this person? What did you do to this guy? Like, this guy is showing up so extremely powerfully and um and openly. Like, this is this is like incredible. This is it's an incredible transformation that you're able to undergo. And as I said before, the beauty of it is that this is your God-given birthright. Like these feel like this power and um this feeling of connection, we're all born with that. We're born with that, and it just gets eroded, as I said, by life and stress and trauma and family and culture.
Hmm. This is where the vulnerability part, comes in because I know you've talked about that a couple times. I saw that, in some of the research. I saw a line that you had talking about the deep and generational wounds of your upbringing, and
Mhm.
so that this is where you're getting into the meat of it, right there. This sounds a little bit like, and I'm not trying to minimize it at all, but it sounds a little bit like inner child stuff.
Mhm.
Am I reading this correctly?
That's definitely one of the sort of lineages that has come into this sort of integrated work that we do. Inner
Okay.
child, you know, um, I do a lot of work with healing inner child wounds that men have that are still impacting them to this day. And then once that is healed and it becomes a practice around sort of giving that part of you what it needed and never got, just doing it now, then you're able to shift your behavior. You're able to shift your posture. You're able to shift um, physically in your body how things work, where things are held, and show up with more of who you are as a man.
Okay. And then you just mentioned something that I caught too. You said where things are held. So
Mm.
is this in a sense also energy work or anything like that?
I mean, it's all energy work in a sense.
It is.
We don't, energy, it's not like we have crystals and um
Sure.
that sort of thing, but energy is real. It's a real thing. Like you have energy, and what kind of
Absolutely. Yeah.
energy do you have? And you can even go so far as to, like, your body is emanating electromagnetic energy, and so you can get to work on that level. So it it works with your energy in that you get to reclaim this energy that you have spent circumnavigating these pathways through your story and through your psyche, and avoiding feeling things and shutting things down. You get to reclaim that, and you are then able to show up with more vitality in all aspects of life, in your relationship, just personally, on your own, at your job, or with your work, with your passion projects. It can be a real game changer.
Interesting. Now, the method that you use then through MELD, that's now we're into the courses, right? Because you've got like a 10-week core course and then something that you told me about called the Forge,
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
So tell me about those two, how those interplay with everything we've been talking about and how they kind of get you from point A to point B here.
Absolutely.
Wow.
So CORE is a 10-week program where we teach you about the nervous system, what happens, how stress impacts your body. And this is based in decades of research in what we call emotional physiology, where stress and how stress and trauma impacts the body and how that shows up physically. So we teach to sort of appease the intellect, because men want to know. They want to know. We want to trust. Um, and and then we also experience. So it's an experiential training. You come with your nervous system and you learn about how it works in the body, and then we practice. So we put you into a men's group and we give you a format for how the meeting goes. And I co-lead the core program with my other partner, Mike Sagoon, who's a gifted coach and facilitator. Um, and we facilitate you through the group meetings. and we get you to sort of stay in the body and stay focused and connect on this deeper level that we've been talking about. And there's a little bit of work on the side, very light sort of work on outside between the weekly meetings. And then at the end of it, you're able to stay with that men's group. It meets over Zoom. Or we have resources for you then to go start your own men's group uh, with this format that we've created. So that's core, and that's kind of an intro program. If you're new to this kind of work, but you know that something needs to shift,
Yeah.
core is a great place to start.
Okay.
It's very sort of compassionate. It's very like where, wherever you're coming from, you can fit in there. Um, we also have a program called Forge, which is a 12-week group coaching, small group coaching program. And that's more personalized. That's who are you? Like, where are you at? What are your challenges? What are your aspirations? What are your goals? Where are you at today, right now? What are you dealing with? Um, when what's amazing about the body is that the body is always in the present. Your mind is pulling you into the future. It is, you know, reminding you of the past. But when you can slow down and just kind of say, all right, mind, I'll be right back. You're doing your thing. That's great. I'm going to check in with my body. You, boom, like you enter the present moment. And we do a lot of work with the breath. We do a lot of work um, with just going very slowly, which isn't a setting that a lot of men get to experience. Um, and Forge is a really incredible program that's led by my mentor Owen Marcus, who is he's almost 72 at this point. He's been doing somatic men's work for close to 30 years and has been working as a rolfer and at an integrated medicine clinic for more like 40 or 45 years at this point. I should know that better, but um, he's he is where a lot of the distillation of this work comes from, and so Forge is an incredibly powerful program. We also do retreat trainings. So we get together, we meet somewhere in nature, at a center, not just in the woods, but um, we, we get together, we sort of unplug or unwind from the grind of daily life, and we slow down and we get to be for a prolonged period of time in this place of slowness and allow things to start emerging. And those we have one coming up in October that's going to be in the Northeast, and that's called Prime. And then we have a training that we're going to be launching in the near future that we did at the last company that we are just putting the finishing touches on for coaches and therapists and entrepreneurs. We've also had like doctors and teachers and anyone who wants to work with men. We train them how to bring this methodology into their practice. Um, and that's called right now it's called the integrated training. It's it's longer. It's 6 to 8 months, and it's a really
Mm,
deep dive. Also, a personal development. All of our trainings are experiential, so it's hard to lead a man somewhere that you haven't been yourself.
absolutely.
So yeah, so that's why all of our trainings are experiential. So we have core, we have forge, prime, the integrated training is coming later. And as you encouraged me to mention at the onset, we have a podcast that we're putting the finishing touches on as well, called the MELD Men podcast. And that is stories with our guys that have done work with us over the years in various capacities. They're telling their story of who they were, where they were, um, what they needed to change, and then where they are now as a result of opening themselves up to this way of operating and really sort of shifting their whole operating system to include more parts of who they really are.
Nice. Nice. I'm glad that we hit all those points, and I'm glad that we were able to kind of explain to everybody how they kind of go in progression. also. So that's really cool. The question I think that I have at this point, after hearing about the courses especially, I'm a guy, I'm sitting at home, I'm listening to this podcast right now. What might I be going through or feeling or experiencing in my life that will, uh, as a symptom, maybe, for lack of a better word, that's going to let me know, that's going to alert me, hey, maybe I should look into Duncan's program. Maybe I should go check out MELD. What is it about my
Well,
life that I want to change by contacting
that's
you?
a that's a great question. Um, you know, we get we get a lot of guys who are, they've checked a lot of the boxes. They have, maybe they're functional, they're maybe highly functional, maybe successful, maybe extremely successful. But underneath, there's this feeling that, like, is this it? Like, isn't there more satisfaction that I'm supposed to be like entitled to at this point? Like, I've done everything that I was told to do. I did everything, or, like I did everything that I thought I was supposed to do. I still am lacking this fulfillment, this like this vitality and this contentment or joy. It's if I get a moment of joy, it's so fleeting because there's all this stuff that I have, weighing on me. So a lot of um, a lot of our guys, you know, there can be sort of like depression. There can be like issues in the marriage or issues in the relationship or wanting to connect with your kids better or more deeply. Um, this work is incredible for fathers. Um, as a father, you get to not only feel better, which is the kicker of all of this, is like you get to feel better. And feeling better, you also get to help your family feel better. And as a father, especially if you have a son, but whoever your kids are, you are then modeling for them how to integrate these parts of yourself that that we were never really shown how to do. And so they learn, your kids, the number one way that kids learn is by watching. And you can tell them whatever you want, but they're going to do what you do.
Right.
So by embodying this work and or by just approaching with interest some of this work and some of these methods, you are rewriting neural pathways. Like the first time you do this stuff, you are starting to rewrite like how your brain works, and then your kids will start to see that in you, and they'll just pick it up, naturally. If they're older, then, you're modeling it for them and you're showing up for some of the difficult conversations that you guys are probably having in a different way where you're able to hold that space and support them and not get so hurt. Um, a good a good marker or a good sort of signal is if something is a 2 or a 3, but it ends up feeling like an 8 or a 9 in your system, and you end up just like getting really mad or getting really fraught and either exploding or just like sometimes when things reach critical levels, we just kind of like shut down, we power down. So noticing if you shut down in conflict, we do a lot of work with that. Noticing if you explode in conflict, we do a lot of work with that. Um, really, what's been amazing about this work for me is that it applies to all of us because we're all living in this paradigm. We're all like living in this timeline on this in this model. So, even if things, it's not about like I'm in crisis, but if you are in crisis, we can help you with that also. But if things just don't feel like they're landing the way that you want them to, we can help with that.
Wow. Great answer. I love that. Okay.
Thanks.
The I love the way you pulled it all together, and honestly, you've done a fantastic job of explaining this whole program to everybody. So, I really think that anybody who's sitting at home and is feeling any of these ways, like you've been talking about, has a pretty good idea of whether or not they need to, pick up the phone, jump online, hit your website. All of this is available through your website link.
That's right.
Okay,
MELD.community.
okay, and we'll definitely have that in the show notes. And then you're also available on social media. We talked about Instagram, right?
That's right. Yeah, we're MELD.men on Instagram. We're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn, we're on TikTok, we're all over the place.
You're
So
everywhere. Great.
yeah,
All right, listen, I you've unpacked so much here today, brother. I want to make sure that I give you the floor for a minute or two as we kind of wrap things up here because is there anything that I didn't ask you about that you want to make sure you get out there? Maybe there's something we talked about and you want to just drive home the point a little further, a little more. Or hey, maybe if we covered it all, is there a nugget you want to leave behind for everybody? Or hey, all three. The next few minutes are yours. Floor is yours, brother. How you want to wrap this up?
I appreciate that, Rory. Thanks so much. Um, I something that I tell all of the guys that I work with, like this isn't if you're not if your life isn't feeling the way that you want it to feel, um, it's it's probably because of some of the things that we talked about, in the past that happened to you, or just sort of general, um, you know, just be, life, stress, family, these things, they erode our abilities and our skills to feel connected and to feel expressed and to feel processed. Um, and it's not your fault. You're not bad. You're not broken. You just need some support. So something I tell a lot of our guys is it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. If you want to change the way that you're showing up and the way that your life looks and feels, then that's when you're ready to start living into like this new version of yourself. We are ready to help you do that.
That's awesome. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility.
Right.
I like that. That's great. All right. Folks, men's coach, somatic facilitator, and co-founder of MELD, the program you've all just heard all about, Duncan Rich. Duncan, thank you for coming on the show today and sharing everything you have, man. It's been awesome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you. Folks, that's been another episode of the Power Man podcast. And, I hope that one of the reasons why you guys keep sticking around is because we keep bringing, awesome, powerful men like this onto the program with unbelievably powerful messages like, what Duncan's been talking about today. If you're feeling this way at all, sitting there listening to this at home or in your car, driving around going, man, he's describing me, jump online. Okay, look them up. The website's going to be in the show notes for you, and you can access that on your phone with one click. So go ahead and make sure that you check this out, and you do something for you. The reason that we do this and the reason we're asking you to do that is because you have value. You matter, and at some point, you're just going to have to believe it. Until next time.